I'm Jay Rohr. This is Film Obsessive, and joining us today are Elizabeth Stam and Michael Glover Smith, and we're talking about the movie Hekla. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me.
So I guess the best place to start is what is Hekla about?
Take it away.
Well, Hekla is my fifth feature film as a writer-director. I'm a Chicago-based filmmaker, and this is a comedy about a day in the life of an actress, and it's the busiest day of her life. She's got four auditions. She's got headshots. She plays Lady Macbeth in a dive bar production of Shakespeare's Macbeth. And all the while, she also has to contend with a breakup with her sort of on again, off again girlfriend. So it's a very chaotic day in the life of a Chicago actress.
Her busiest day so far. Who knows?
I guess one of the first things is this is a character returning from a previous film you did called Relative. Is this the first time that you've brought back a character, or not to imply like a cinematic universe or anything like that, but like, what was so interesting about this individual that you felt like exploring their story more?
It is the first time I've brought back a character. I wouldn't really call this a sequel, though. It's more of a spin-off because she's the only character really from the previous film who comes back. And you don't need to have seen Relative, my previous film, to understand this movie. It's completely self-contained. But the reason why I wanted to bring Hekla back is because I wanted to work with Elizabeth Stam again. She was really phenomenal in Relative. A lot of people who watched that movie felt like she was the high point of the film. They said it's a scene stealing, performance. And Liz and I really got along like a house on fire. And so I thought, why not revisit this character?
Elizabeth, would you like to add anything
I
to
mean,
that?
yeah, honestly, we met in 2019 and became fast friends. And we met in Alabama, actually. Um, and then we discovered we both lived in Chicago, went and grabbed a drink, and immediately decided we want to work together. Mike was sending over some scripts that he had worked on. And the film Relative actually was first called Together Through Life. And I read it, and the complications of family always have fascinated me. So I just immediately vibed with the script and was so excited to work on it. And then getting to be on set with Mike and just watching him create and do his thing was just incredibly impressive and just something that I have always wanted to be able to do. So being able to watch him do it was a dream. And then we just went from there and started working together.
Was it easier to get into the character on this occasion because you had a hand in helping write the script, correct? Like you had some a lot more input in what was going to happen this time than previously. Is that the right way to put it?
No, yeah, definitely. It was very easy to get into this character, not only because I relate to her so much, but I had a hold of the script for like 2 years. And then because we were going to do it in 2023, and that was before I had worked on it. And so our funding ended up falling through. And while we were waiting to kind of figure out what the next step was, Mike just handed the script over to me and he was like, have fun, rewrite whatever you think needs to be reworked and just make her as you feel she needs to be. And so that also just really getting to dive into so much of the details of the script really made me understand her and made it so easy when the first day on set was there. I really feel like I had a full grasp on who this character was.
Um, when you're working within like the confines of a city, I get this one of the things I liked was that it's familiar because I'm from Chicago, but at the same time it's doesn't really feel like we're doing like the tourist tour of the town. Was that sort of an intentional dimension while filming?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, I've seen all of the big Chicago movies, and I kind of bristle when I see the Bean or I see, even the Sears Tower or the Hancock Building. It's like the most obvious signposts of Chicago. And in my previous films, I kind of deviated from showing downtown at all. Because I really think the only time a lot of Chicagoans go downtown and spend time in the Loop is when they're showing it to family and friends who are visiting from out of town. So I'm not a fan of like the tourist eye view of the city. But having said all that, I did want to go downtown. I kind of wanted to travel all over, and show how Hekla had to traverse the entire city. And so a lot of the places that we show are kind of my favorite places. Like I think Marina Towers is just, architecturally beautiful, and it's the cover of a Wilco album. And I love Lake Michigan. I love the Chicago River. I love the Goodman Theater. I love the Wrigley Building. I think architecturally that's really the most beautiful building in the city. So I was trying to show things that I liked, and that's really what filmmaking is all about. You kind of create your own, you create your own world, and this is my version of Chicago.
I found that very interesting, like some of the location choices too, because like I'm familiar with Cunines, where Hekla ends up doing a production of the Scottish play, and it was really interesting because I was like, I could see somebody doing indie theater there, but that's also like one of the worst choices for a place to like do an entire Shakespeare play. So it was kind of like it was very interesting to me that you would pick that spot because it felt very real to me, but at the same time it was like this is the worst location to do this. Were you trying to get that sense off to people that like
Yes.
these are performers desperate for a place to hone their craft and perform?
Yeah, I mean, Cunines is really small. That
Mhm.
space is tiny, and it's not conducive to putting on a play. But yeah, that was kind of the thought was this is a theater troupe that likes putting on Shakespeare in bars and not charging admission and bringing Shakespeare to the people, instead of trying to get people to come to the play. And so I thought it was kind of an ideal location. And we had a lot of fun shooting that scene because the bar was open. We did not shoot there when they were closed. Some of the people sitting at the bar are extras who we, asked to come, but some of the people sitting there were just bystanders, just people who happened to come in and have a drink that night. And we had a production assistant kind of standing outside of the front door telling people, oh, we're shooting a movie right now, like it's okay if you go in there, just try not to look at the camera. And so kind of blurring the line between fiction and documentary like that was really thrilling.
Elizabeth, did it bring up any like memories of when you yourself have been desperately seeking an opportunity to get out there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was a flight attendant for years, and every time I got that little mic on the plane, I would make it a performance. Like you're just anywhere you can find is where you're going to do what you love to do. And also, I think it's based off of a real troupe in Chicago, and Mike and I went to one of their performances at Holly G's in Logan Square, and it was just packed. We were like, where are they even going to do? It was also a performance of Macbeth, right, Mike?
Correct.
Yeah, and they were just so packed. People were like, they were performing on the tables, and we were like looking from the window. And so just seeing that going on in Chicago, I think we wanted to make it a just a tribute to them and show that it is something that Chicago is doing and making any space a space where they can perform.
I'd like to ask about one specific scene in particular. There's a lot of this movie is mostly about Hekla's relationship as it kind of disintegrates, and we see most of it in flashbacks, as it seems to be like haunting her throughout the film. And I found it really interesting the first time we encounter her romantic partner, because I initially thought that the performance was like a little bit flat, but then as the movie went on, I started to think backwards on it, and I thought that was it Mary Tilden?
Mhm.
Mary Tilden's performance is actually somebody who's deflated by the relationship that she's in. And was that like an intentional situation, or did I completely misread it?
Nope, you got it 100%, and that makes me really happy because I love Mary. She's a really dynamic performer, and believe it or not, what she's most known for is comedy. She's a member of an improv troupe called The Devil's Daughter at Improv Olympic. And so I was kind of asking her to do something that's very different from what she's known for. And what I basically told her was, I said, you have kind of a tricky task because we need to see the arc of an entire relationship in your scenes with Hekla. And the first time we see you, you're at your lowest point. So I think deflated is a perfect word to describe her in that scene. And then I said, the next time we see Tyler, she's going to be meeting Hekla for the first time at a party on a rooftop. And the chemistry has to be magical, And then every time we see the two of them after that, their relationship is going to be getting worse and worse until the final scene kind of comes full circle and we understand why she was the way she was in the first scene. So yeah, you
Elizabeth,
got it.
Elizabeth, when you were like helping punch up the script and adding your voice to it and your perspective, did you ever find it difficult to like restrain the character? Like a lot of people sometimes wouldn't want to like diminish. I mean, you're the central character, but at the same time, there's a quality to the film where she's not always like winning the day. You know, that you're at auditions and you're feeling awkward about like what to do and so on and so forth. Were there ever moments where you were like, I have to like bring the dialogue down so that she doesn't seem like she's dominating every situation she's in?
That's actually a great question. I did not have that instinct. Um, just because I think, I mean, as an actor, you're getting rejected all the time. And just putting on a face, I mean, we all do it. We're all acting at all times. And just, I think Hekla is the master at putting on a face when maybe things aren't going well and just everything is fine, everything is okay. And that's also the thing I think that Mary Tilden brings to this film that really completes it is those are the moments where you see Hekla and like that is who she really is. And she really brings Hekla down to, being a real person and communicating her or trying to communicate her feelings and emotions. Um, but I think Hekla loves to dominate a conversation. I think she maybe could use a couple social cues in life, but I think that's like her charm almost is like she does dominate, but I think she's also a great listener and like really takes in what each actor or person she's talking to throughout the film is going through as well, and then immediately relates it back to herself.
This might be a question for both of you in its own respect. There's a point where Hecla's has an audition with, for lack of a better term, a rather pretentious director who has a very specific ideas about experimental theater, and I was just curious the story that she mentions, because literature is something that comes up in a lot of your work, Michael. Um, and so I was just curious, is that a real book? Because I tried to find it through her description of it, and yeah, I'm just curious about that aspect of the film.
It's a real short story, and I think Liz was just looking for it on her
I
shelf.
have it somewhere. It really is. It is a real short story. And Mike told me about it. Mike, it's your favorite, right?
It's one of my favorites. Yeah, it was a story I read decades ago because I was living with a guy who had a book of Apollinaire's short stories, and one day I just opened it up and started reading it, and I was blown away by this story, which I thought was really unusual. And then when it came time to write the script, I wanted there to be an audition where she wasn't reading lines, where a director was asking her to just talk about herself. And I thought it would be funny if he was a little pretentious and she tells a story about herself and it's not what he's looking for. So then he tries another approach and says, just why don't you describe the plot of a movie you saw or a book you read? And then she describes this particular story. And the amazing thing about that scene is it's a really long monologue, and Liz never rehearsed that with me. This is how well she and I work together. There were other scenes that we rehearsed in advance, but that particular one, Grant, the actor who plays Blake, the director, was not available to rehearse in advance because he was acting in Angels in America. So he was super busy. And so I said, it's okay. I mean, I trust these actors, they're total pros. And the first time I saw Liz do that was while the camera was rolling. And I was blown away um, at how she just crushed that dialogue. It's really, I think, one of the high points of the film because it's such a long monologue, and yet the way she tells the way she recaps the story, I just find it mesmerizing to watch.
And Mike actually, when I was doing the rewriting, Mike was like, and rewrite the way I like told you to say that whole story. And I'm like, absolutely not. I feel like the way that he writes it is just, it captures it perfectly. And I think it grabs each point that is so important in reading the story. And I was lucky enough to also love the short story. I think it's so captivating. And so good. I read it a billion times before filming too. So I definitely had the monologue down.
Well, you definitely sold me on it. Um, One of the things that's very interesting in this film are the different types of auditions that we see, because they aren't just revealing about our central character, they're also kind of revealing about the industry. Were you trying to explore that, not just the simple difficulties of the frustration of the being in a chaotic day, having to do all this stuff, but also just sort of the frustrations that performers have to go through? You sit in this room with somebody and they give you nothing and they expect you to give them everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I really wanted it to be ambiguous as to whether or not Hekla was going to get any of these parts. That you're right. The casting directors always seem kind of inscrutable. And there's Hekla is in every scene of this film. She's in almost every shot, but I wanted to have a brief moment after the first audition where the three people who were auditioning her, you saw them kind of talk to each other, and you see that they don't know whether or not they say, I have her in the maybe column. So that's, I think, very accurate. As a director myself who's gone through this process many times, it's like you have the yes column, which is, when right away you want to cast somebody. You have the no column where you don't want them, but most people go into the maybe column where you think that could work. I may need to see them for a callback. So, having said all that, I have so much sympathy for actors and so much respect for them because they do give everything and they don't get paid to audition. And yet that's an important part of their job. Actors are working when they audition. And so yeah, that the I wanted to show a lot of different kinds of auditions. And there's one audition where she's reading with a scene partner, which is the first one. There's the experimental play where she's just talking about herself. There's the douche commercial where she's selling a product, and then she does the Oscar Wilde monologue, which is kind of, I guess the most traditional. And she also sings a song. So yeah, it's a tribute to actors and kind of all of the different kinds of things that they have to do on auditions.
Did that bring up any terrible memories on your part, Elizabeth? Have you been on this horror tour of
Oh,
hectic auditions yourself?
oh, absolutely. I've never included a breakup in that day, but I have had four in a row, especially before COVID, when you had to physically get yourself to these auditions. And it, I actually, when we did the one with the experimental play with Blake, the director, I was like, oh, I've never actually done one like this where they just like tell me about yourself. And then I think it was like during filming or right after filming, I had an audition and they literally were like, just tell me about yourself. And I still had that monologue down. So I was almost like, well, I'm from Nebraska. And I'm like, wait, I can't. I'm Liz. I'm not Hekla in this moment. Um, but yeah, I've had each and every one of those auditions and sometimes all in one day, truly.
Given some of the events that occur throughout the film, everybody who makes any kind of a movie always runs into the problem that there's, for any variety of reasons, there's stuff that doesn't make it into the film. There's no money, there's no time, whatever, or you're editing, you realize something doesn't work. Was there anything that didn't make it into the film that you kind of wish had, or you're glad hadn't?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, this film had such a long gestation process. I mean, to be honest with you, I started writing it in 2016, a decade ago. So it went through many, many revisions. And originally, it was about a character who was not Hecla. It was about a woman named Michaela. And it was only after I worked with Liz on Relative, which we shot in 2021, that I started thinking, oh, I I should rewrite this script and make it about Hecla. And so, and then I brought, Liz on board as a co-writer, and then we visited all of the locations, many times. So by the time we got around to shooting it, it was a tight 10-day shooting schedule, but we knew exactly what we were going to get. Um, we do always find things, while we're shooting that are kind of unexpected, but we never run out of time. We never feel like, oh, we can't do the thing we want to do. I mean, by the time we're ready to start, um, we pretty much know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Elizabeth, is there
Sorry,
anything
I
you
was
want?
thinking of the transit day when you're like running around. I mean, you never know what the city of Chicago is going to throw at you. So that was probably the day that we had the most like surprises. Like the scene where she's on the train and she's doing her makeup. The lady next to me was just some lady on the train, and she was like, "What are you guys doing?" And her and Mike became friends, and he was like, "Do you want to be in this scene?" And she was like, "Okay, I'll try not to look at the camera." And she was so excited and so cute. And in the little moment, you could see her like peek at the camera with a smile, and that's one of my favorite moments, just because she was so encouraging and sweet. Um, yeah, that was probably the most hectic day as far as like unexpected things happening.
When it came to the production, one of the things I like about this film is it's mostly shot in black and white, but then we get these shifts into a sort of color world that is more vibrant and fabulous whenever Hecla is performing. Um, some of the production choices in that were very interesting. What was your input involving that, or did you trust whoever was behind that? Because there are some interesting choices, like you mentioned the commercial that gets shot. I mean, she has what can only be described as a douche rifle at one point, and there's something really interesting about her shoes too. I'm not a foot guy, but I got captivated by Hecla's shoes at one
Those are
point
my real
because
shoes.
They're fascinating. They're like five different colors,
I
and
wore them
when you first
yesterday.
they're amazing. I understand why somebody would want those.
Well, we have to give a shout out to our production designer, Heather Kuhlman, who was amazing. She was also the costume designer. So she had a large input into the overall design of the film. And it was actually her idea to include color sequences because my original plan was to shoot the entire movie in black and white. And Heather, in her infinite wisdom, came to me and said, Hekla is the most colorful character ever. You have to find a way to get some color into this movie. And I thought about it and I thought, yeah, she's right. Hekla is so larger than life. She has such a big, colorful personality that if we have some scenes in color, that will make the color more meaningful. And it will also be kind of shocking in a way. So I was thinking about it kind of in terms of the Wizard of Oz, the beginning where it goes from sepia to color. That's such a shocking moment, no matter how many times you've seen that movie. And I think we were kind of trying for something similar.
And Mike said to Heather and I, he was like, "You guys go. Don't tell me anything." And then I don't think Mike saw any of the footage until he started editing everything. Um, so that was really fun to kind of get terrifying and fun to get to experiment because that was what we had. We shot all the color stuff first. So that was kind of the beginning of the whole road ahead. And so, yeah, it was very exciting and terrifying. And I mean, creating those costumes, she had the best. She was so good. And it was just so fun. It was great.
Um, so I was going to ask a question, but I think this filmmaker's name is Eric Romer, in relation to your body of work, and for some reason it just went right out the side of my head, the train went right through my brain and out the other side. But would you like to talk about that? That individual's influence on your work?
Oh yeah, well he's one of my biggest influences. Eric Romer was a film critic in France in the 1950s for a magazine called Cahiers du Cinéma, and he was part of the French New Wave, where it was him and four other guys. They were all writing film criticism, and then they wanted to make movies themselves, so they all made the transition from literally writing movie reviews for a living to becoming independent filmmakers. And the movies that they made beginning in the late 50s and early 60s absolutely revolutionized cinema. There was Romer, there was Francois Truffaut, Jean-Luc Godard, Claude Chabrol, and Jacques Rivette. And I love all of their work, but Romer really speaks to me personally because his films are very character driven, and they have a lot of dialogue, which my movies do as well. And I love watching movies about people talk. I mean, I think there's kind of a misconception that if there's a lot of dialogue in a movie, that it's not cinematic, quote unquote. That people have said that about my films. They've said, "Oh, this would work better as a stage play." And I think that is total bullshit. And Romer had the same criticism leveled against him as well. People would say, "Oh, he should have just written novels. Why did he become a filmmaker?" But I think his films are intensely cinematic in a more subtle way. And what I love about his movies is they're like documentaries. They're very specific to the time and the place in which they were made. I mean, he made a lot of great movies in Paris. And his movies are all, he was fanatical about when he shot his films, the time of year and the weather, and the time of day. Like all of that stuff plays a big role in his films, and I'm influenced by all of that.
As an indie production, do you feel that gives you a certain freedom with the creativity. Like you're not going to be constrained by certain demands that a more mainstream, for lack of a better term, a more mainstream production might have. And that's a question for both of you. Do you feel like a freedom in your performance and your examination of the characters that you probably wouldn't get in a more traditional Hollywood sort of picture?
Absolutely. I'm curious to see what Liz has to say about this, but I personally think that independent filmmaking is the purest form of filmmaking there is. And, of course, I've never worked in in Hollywood, so I would welcome the challenge. I've never been asked to sell out. I make the movies that I want to make. I write my own scripts. I find the money to do it. But interestingly, because it's a filmmaking is collaborative, you always have to compromise. Whenever you're working with a large group of people and there's money involved and there are resources involved, you know, everybody wants the movie to be as good as it can be. And oftentimes, conflict arises. And I can tell you, Hekla is not my most expensive film. I've made a couple of films with a higher budget. And I did self finance most of Hekla. And that did give me more freedom because on previous films, when people are cutting you checks for tens of thousands of dollars, oftentimes they do want to have input. And there are previous films I made that I did want to shoot in black and white, and I was talked out of it by the money people. And I think that's surprising because this is independent filmmaking, and you would think that anybody who wants to be involved in an independent film would feel like anyone who would want to watch this type of movie would be adventurous enough to accept a film shot in black and white. And yet, there are certain people, and not just the money people, but occasionally the cinematographers, the producers, they'll say, yeah, it's going to really hurt your chances of ever getting on Netflix or Hulu if you shoot in black and white. So, with this film, I was able to, because I was self-financing it, I think I was able to really, this is the pure heroin version of Michael Glover Smith. And that included giving up more control as well. Like Liz indicated a minute ago, there were 2 days of second unit photography where I was not there by choice. I said, Liz, you and Heather go off and shoot this stuff and don't tell me what you're going to do. Go nuts. And, I did that thinking that would give her more ownership of the character. I'm like, she's going to be playing Hekla before I show up. And that's going to give her the confidence. And the same thing with asking her to rewrite the script. I kind of learned that on Relative, that it's really helpful when you're collaborating with an actor if you can say something like, this dialogue that I wrote kind of sucks. Is there anything you'd rather say? And actors kind of get excited. They're like, oh, how can I rephrase this? And then that lets them feel like they're really kind of flexing their creative muscles. And so, I mean, Liz kind of rewriting this script was a logical extension of that. And because I was self-financing it, it made it very easy to, to do that.
Yeah, wow. I just had so many thoughts go through my mind. I've never thought about this. I mean, obviously, I'm so grateful for this. Like, I'm just a measly actor. Like Mike said, you don't get the opportunity when someone is like, hey, rewrite this if you're interested. Like, a lot of times it's like, these are my words, don't change it, and respect. So, getting the opportunity to kind of add my own flair is something I'm not taking for granted. And like, I fully appreciate that so much. It is crazy getting to be so involved in this process, not just as an actor, and props to you, Mike, because the opinions are rampant. Everyone has an opinion on what should have been done differently and like specific things that work and don't work. And so kind of getting to be a part of the decision making, yeah, is huge. And I've never like Mike said, never done anything like any Hollywood film or anything. And I can't imagine how many ideas are just thrown to the curb and not even considered. So just getting to have my like everything considered and freedom to put what we wanted onto the screen, I think is a real gift. And I that's the reason indie filmmaking is so beautiful, and going to these festivals and seeing all of these indie films and just like the different ideas that all of these people have that probably could have been discarded and not even offered is very cool. And it's cool to literally crawl inside that one person's brain, whereas in Hollywood it's so many different people, which is cool in its own way, but I think that's the beauty of the indie filmmaking.
So the film itself, it's premiering at the Music Box here in Chicago on May 10th, I believe. But you've already taken it to a couple of festivals, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we've had 3 festival screenings, all of which were out of state, and that's interesting. I mean, I always kind of want to premiere a movie in Chicago, but it never happens. You know, it's you're really at the mercy of who wants to show it. You know, you start submitting it to festivals, and you always start by aiming very high, and as you should, you know, because you want the film to have the best chance it can in the marketplace. We were really lucky to premiere where we did. There's a great festival in Florence, Alabama called the George Lindsay Film Festival, which is actually where Liz and I met for the first time 7 years ago. And so that was fitting in and of itself. But the caliber of the programming there is very high, and they don't show a whole lot of features. So it was amazing to premiere there. Liz won an award. They basically created an award for her. They don't give out acting awards, but they created something called the Festival Spirit Award, which they gave her for writing and acting and producing this film, which I thought was, you know, a fabulous idea.
You're so sweet. Yeah, we love that.
uh, and then, you know, we've played 2 other festivals, and then she won an acting award in Butte, Montana. So I think Liz and I were both really happy to see that people in other parts of the country got the film, and also found Hekla to be a really relatable character, because it's kind of like when you do well in places where they don't know you, then you know you're going to go over like gangbusters when you bring it home, because they'll understand it better in Chicago than they do anywhere else.
Definitely.
That was one of the things I was curious about. Do you worry a little bit that the film might strike some people as like as sort of like a narrower niche? Because some people might think that this is for theater people, because it does seem to be about a person, but it is more about relationships and striving for something. Not so much it is a slice of life, but it isn't like this is solely some like sort of like 70s realism. This is what it's like to be a struggling performer. You know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, there were times when we were making it where I thought, okay, this is a weird movie that not everyone is going to get, and that's okay. You know, like I'm making it because I'm putting everything that I know to be true about what it's like to be an artist into this movie. And I feel like if I understand it and it's specific to me, then by extension, I think everyone can understand it. You know, I think what really trips people up is when they try too hard to make something accessible to a broad audience. When you try too hard to make everything relatable, then I think you really end up satisfying no one completely. But you know, Jay, you kind of indicated this in the way you phrased the question, but I think ultimately, even people who are not artists should be able to relate to Hekla, because ultimately what this movie is about, it's about a young woman who has a professional life and a personal life, and she's having a hard time striking a balance between those things. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of people can relate to, no matter what their profession might be.
Yeah, I didn't think about it until we've been submitting into festivals, and working with Mike on Relative was so relatable to so many people in different walks of life. And so going from that to Hekla is definitely a huge switch and is very vulnerable. But as we've been showing it, it's insane how many people have related uh, to this, and just in like working on their creative selves too. Just they really see themselves in Hekla, people from all walks of life. And not only does that make it just less vulnerable, it just makes it so satisfying in showing it at these festivals. Is the part where people come up to you and they're like, that was me in my 20s. And it's really beautiful to see it visually on screen. So yeah, definitely something I didn't consider until recently, but definitely there.
So, like I said, the film is having its Chicago premiere on May 10th at the Music Box, and then where is it going to go from there? What is the plan? How are people supposed to get the best opportunity to see this film?
So I'm a firm believer in the big screen experience. My last film, Relative, I self-distributed theatrically, and we kept it in theaters for 2 years, which really goes against the grain, I think, of how a lot of indie filmmakers think about their movies. I mean, I think a lot of people are too quick to kind of dump their films onto streaming services. And so, and Relative ultimately, is it was picked up for distribution by Music Box Films, which is amazing because they're a huge indie distributor. They've got us on Amazon and Tubi and Apple Plus. But I think Hekla, I think there's a good chance we could get theatrical distribution through a distributor. So we're doing festivals now, and we're playing a big festival this summer. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what it is because they're not announcing their lineup for another month. But it's the kind of festival where there's an industry presence. Let me just say that, and I would love to partner with a distributor to get this into theaters in New York, LA, and Chicago for like a week-long run before it becomes available to stream. But even if that doesn't happen, I'll do what I did with Relative. I'll self-distribute theatrically, and then after we've taken it around the country and played as many places as I can get to show it, then I'll think about trying to license it to a distributor for streaming. And if anyone is curious about where to find out info about this film, my website is the best place. It's michaelgloversmith.com. And I have a page that's just dedicated to news. And that's the best place to find info on upcoming screenings.
All right. Well then, what is the future for the both of you? I know you're in the middle of this right now, and I don't want to put too much on you. Like you've made something. Now what's next? But more, more, more. That's the society we live in. But anyway, like what is down the road for you? What are your plans for the future? What
Definitely.
dive bars are we going to see you performing in?
Uh, honestly, I have a project coming up in September, but currently I'm trying to balance kind of festivals and my day job right now. So it's so much going on, but very excited for this short that I'm going to be doing with Trey Manchester in September. Um, and that's kind of all that I have on the horizon right now. Why she
Liz,
said,
what about the Jacob Gregor film?
oh my gosh, I did a film with Jacob Gregor. It was a dream. I saw his film at a film festival in Chicago, End of History. And wow, just stunning film. And I slid into his DMs and I was like, hey, wow, I'm a big fan. And 6 months later, he responded and he was like, hey, I've got this audition process coming up if you want to audition. And I did, and we actually shot it over earlier this year. And it was just a dream come true. It was so cool. It was an improvised film, which I've never gotten to do before. Um, and so hopefully that'll be, he doesn't have a release date yet, but we finished shooting and he's in the editing process. So that'll be really exciting. And I can't wait for that to come.
Michael?
Yeah, I have a script ready to go for another feature. The name of the film is Promenade, and hopefully we'll shoot it next year once the festival life of Hekla has kind of died out. But making movies is always contingent upon being able to raise money. So keep your fingers crossed for me that I can raise the money I need to do Promenade, because it would be on a higher budget level than anything I've ever done before. And so if I can't raise the money to do that, then I'll have to figure out the kind of movie that I can make. And that's kind of, the joy of indie filmmaking is you have to be flexible and you have to be prepared to kind of downshift sometimes your ambitions and do the thing you can do.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. You've been very generous with your time. We appreciate you taking a moment to speak with us about this film. I wish you the best of luck with it, and we're going to try to get some eyes on this and hopefully get some good attention on Hekla.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Jay, I really appreciated your questions. They weren't always the usual questions.
Yeah, those were great.